Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you would like to add a few extra years to your life? How many of you would like to be able to put a lot more money in your pocket? How would you like to be able to take the dreams of your youth off the shelf, where many of you have discarded them forever, and see them materialize in your life? That's what we're going to talk about today. To be able to do that, you've got to learn to be a goal setter. You know, success itself is the progressive realization of a worthwhile aspiration being pursued as a result of one's recognition of his or her own special needs. Dr. Robert Schuller said that goals are not only necessary to motivate us, they are essential to really keep us alive. The biographies of all great men show that they were goal setters. I don't know if you folks are aware of this or not, but we're told that only about 5% of the people in our society actively pursue goals. We're also told that 95% of all the people in this country, the richest country of all, will have absolutely nothing to look forward to at age 65. They'll either be dependent on society, the government, or dead broke, but they won't have any money. According to the Social Security Department, I think it's about $200 for every 85 out of 100 people. These people were not goal setters or goal reachers. Now, most people will set a goal, and if they fail, they'll never try again. And then you have a lot of people who will never set the first goal because they fear failure and they are afraid of what other people will say about them. They just have not learned how to apply the 3 keys that are necessary to turn goals into gold. Now, this is what we're going to be talking about today. And ladies and gentlemen, if you'll listen closely, we're going to give you those 3 keys. And if applied, they will allow you to reach any goal that you set for yourself. The first key is intense desire. And you're going to find there's a big difference between desire and intense desire. The second key is unshakable faith. Those 2 keys must be used before the goal is ever set. And the third key is persistence or stickability, or the ability to keep on keeping on. That key is used after the goal is set and the plan is put into motion for the accomplishment of that goal. So let's start out by talking about the first key, which is intense desire. What is intense desire? That's really wanting something badly, isn't it? You know, I always like to tell a story about an old guy from down in Possum Trot, Tennessee. I always try to include at least one story about him. His name is Tootie McLean, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about him. And he's a little bit slow. His elevator doesn't quite go to the top floor, so to speak. And to give you an idea, we're here in Nashville, Tennessee today, and Kane Sloan's was the first department store to have escalators. Well, Tootie went to get him a job in the bargain basement, and he walked in on the main floor, and for the first time in his life, he saw escalators. And he didn't know what to make of it. And he just stood there and stared for about 15 minutes, and he finally went over to a clerk, and he said, "Listen, you better get your boss. He's going to have to do something about that stairway, or else you're going to have a basement full of steps." Anyway, Tootie went down to Florida. Never had been to Florida before. Of course, the first thing they did was show him the ocean. And he gave the usual, Tootie quote, "Well, it ain't big as I thought it was," like he was seeing the whole thing. But he saw a guy while he was there that had a pair of alligator shoes. And he had never seen anything like that in his life. And he said, "Sir, what kind of shoes is they?" He said, "Well, they're alligator." He said, "I sure got me a strong hankering for a pair of them." He said, "How much do they cost?" And he said, "Well, I got these on sale for $800. He said $800. Well, he knew he'd have to skin a lot of possums to get $800, so he figured he better let that ride. But then he remembered when they checked into the motel, the desk clerk said, "If you go out back, be real careful. There's a canal out there. It's got an old alligator in it." Tootie said, The light come on. So he runs back to the motel, goes out back, pulls off his brogan, strips down to his overalls, and he looks out there, and there's that old alligator about half asleep in the lily pads. He jumps right up straddle of him, and I mean snail darters and and tadpoles and lily pads and water's flying everywhere. Dogs are barking, people running in and out of the room, see what's going on. Well, Tootie watches this wrestling. So he put a sleeper hold on that alligator, and he got him real good, and he wrestled him out on the bank and pinned him, and he looked down, and he jumped up and said, "Just my luck, this one ain't wearing no shoes." You know, when I was real young, there was a Bible verse that really disturbed me, and it's from the book of Mark. It said, "What things soever you desire when you pray, believe that you'll receive them and you'll have them." My family worked hard, and they prayed hard, and we didn't have a lot of things materially speaking. And I know when I was in high school, you know, just a bicycle was an impossibility, and I wanted a lot of things, and I didn't get them. And I saw some pretty immoral people that had about anything they wanted. So I said, that verse of Scripture is just a lot of words, and that's all. But then, a few years ago, I was reading the story of David and Goliath, and I found out for the first time what desire is really about, even though I'd heard that story 100 times. See, the Philistines were arch enemies of King Saul and the Israelites. And once they came with an army, and they camped on a hill, and right across the valley on the next hill was the Israelite army. And they had a giant named Goliath, 9 feet tall, according to some translations. He had 125 pounds of armor. He had a spearhead that weighed 15 pounds, and he intimidated those Israelites. Every day, he would come out, and he would challenge them. And he'd say, "Send your champion. Send someone to fight me. If he whips me, we'll be your slaves. But if I win, you be our slaves." And, of course, no one took him up on it. They were absolutely scared to death. Then there's David. David is too young to fight, but he's got 3 brothers in the army, and his dad told him one day, he said, "Here's some food. Go see about your brothers. Bring back something. Let me know they're okay." So when David arrived at the Israelite camp, there's Goliath, as always, parading around. In front of him is a shield bearer, and he is making fun, and he's mocking, and right away it appalled David. He didn't like it at all. So he went up, and he heard the soldiers talking, and they were saying things like, you know, if someone would take Goliath on, the king will give him his daughter in marriage, and also make their family tax-free. So David said, "What was that again?" He asked 2 or 3 times about it, and his brothers even scolded him. They said, "You know, you're just a young kid. Quit asking so many questions." But he was so persistent that some of the soldiers said, maybe we've got something here, and they took him in to see Saul. I love this part. David goes in, just a little shepherd boy, and he goes up to Saul, and he said, "Let no man's heart fail because of this Philistine." He said, "I'll fight him." What he was saying is, don't you guys have a heart attack over this guy? I'll go out and handle it for you. No problem. Well, Saul said, "You're just a boy." David said, "I tend sheep." And he said, "Once a lion and a bear came and took one of my lambs, and I went after it. And I smote him, and I took it out of his mouth. And when he rose against me, he said, I got him by the beard, and I killed him. And he said, the Lord delivered me out of the paws of that bear, and he delivered me out of the paws of that lion, and he will surely deliver me out of the hands of this Philistine." Well, he motivated Saul, and he went running to get his armor. He's going to let him wear his armor. But it was too big. David said, "I don't need it." See, there's a lesson there. I don't need anything. I've got everything that I need to succeed with me right now. And that's my staff and my sling. And he goes out to face the giant, and he picks him up 5 smooth stones on the way. Now, when he starts down into the valley, Goliath figured this has got to be a joke. You know, and he got so upset because they would send a boy that he started to cursing, and he really got upset. And David said to him, he said, "You come at me with a sword and a spear." He said, "I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, and this day you're going to be delivered to me." He said, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to feed your carcass to the birds of the air and the beasts of the fields. And guess what? I'm going to cut your own head off with your own sword." And then this is another part I love. And then it said David ran toward him. He didn't dig a foxhole, or he didn't hide behind a tree and try to get some kind of ambush. He ran out to face him. He did exactly what he said he would do. He killed him, and the Philistines ran in every direction with the Israelites in hot pursuit. Now, I say that to say this. How many of those Israelites do you suppose wanted the giant dead? Had a desire for it? Every last one of them, but not to the point of commitment. That's why you don't get a lot of things you want, because you want it to fall out of the sky. You're not willing to commit yourself to make it happen. And David was. You know, when you think of something you really want, make sure that you really want it. Then, like David, commit yourself to action. Be willing to pick up the stones and walk toward the giant, knowing in your heart that you're going to win. That's the first key. The second key is unshakable faith. Faith is seeing things as they can be and not as they are. If you're a failure, you've got to be able to see yourself succeeding. If you're sick, you've got to be able to see yourself well. If you're broke, you've got to see yourself wealthy. It's seeing things as they can be and not as they are. And ultimately, we have the power to decide what we think about ourselves. Don't allow other people to impose limitations on what you can do or what you can become. Take the bumblebee, for example. Biologists say, aerodynamically speaking, it is impossible for the bumblebee to fly. Did y'all know that? His body is too big and his wings are too thin and he just can't fly, but he doesn't know that. He can't read the paper. He doesn't hear the negative news media, so he doesn't know. He gets up in the morning, he expects to fly, so he goes about doing what God intended for him to do. Now, this has nothing to do with my speech at all, but I got to tell you this. I've just gotten off my script, but I'm going to tell you this. I had a run-in with a bumblebee. There might be a little story in this when I was younger. And we lived in the country, and we had a big old frame house, and it had a red roof, tin, had roses all over the front, and we had trouble one time with the bathroom. It caught on fire, but thank goodness we got it put out before it got to the house. We didn't have indoor plumbing, but we had a porch that ran down the side of the house. And every morning, I was about 6 years old, I'd go out to brush my teeth. You know, we'd go out and I'd get me a big glass of water, brush my teeth, spit over this rail. And I noticed these bumblebees down there and the hollyhocks, and I'd seen my granddad chew his tobacco many a time, and he'd patooey and do a real good job of hitting things, and I thought this could be fun, see? So I get me a mouthful of water, wet that bumblebee down real good, knock him off of that flower. This went on. I did this several days. I had me a good deal going. Then one day I just knocked one off, and I was right back getting ready for the next one. And about 6 inches from me was the maddest bumblebee I have ever seen. And I mean, he hit me in the eye, and it got just about that size. And that almost taught me a lesson. Because not too long after that, I was visiting the Heaton family who lived down the road, and they had beehives. I was, again, about 6 years old, and I was fascinated by all those bees on the outside of that hive. And I got to thinking, wouldn't that be fun? I get me a stick, and I rake through those bees, and then I take off down the side of the house, around the corner, and in the screen door on the other side. Boom. I did it. I raked them off. I took off running, looking over my shoulders. They're gaining on me. I go down the side, around the corner, in the screen door. Then I sat in there with the door shut. Yeah, at the bees. They're out there swarming. And I remember the last time I ever did that. This is true, so help me. I had been raking them off all day. And I went out there and I raked through them, and I took off running. And I got about halfway down the side of the house, and I looked back, and there was no bees. So I'm bopping along. I go around the corner, up to the screen door, and it headed me off. There was 1,000 of them. I didn't think bees could think. They had headed me off, and they ate me alive. And there is a moral in this little story. Don't hit on or spit on something that's doing what God intended for them to do, okay? So I just added that into this speech today. You can... few years ago, the Independent Oil Association hired a professor to make a speech at their convention. And he did such a great job that they had decided that they would just hire him in a public relation capacity and send him all over the United States to the major universities in their behalf making speeches. They paid him about $3,000 or $4,000 a week. They furnished him a chauffeur-driven limousine. He had custom-made suits. He stayed at the best hotels. This had been going on for 2 or 3 months. One day the chauffeur's driving the Cadillac and he pecked on the little glass. The professor, sitting in the back, pushed a button and he said, "What can I do for you?" The chauffeur said, "My good man, I want you to know there is no justice in this country at all. None at all." The professor said, "My good man, I want you to know that this is the land of the free and the home of the brave." He said, "I don't care what you say. There is no justice. Let me tell you why. Here we are going down the road to a major university. You are wearing $1,000 custom-made suits. You're making $3,000 to $4,000 a week. You're going to be sleeping in the top hotel in the town tonight. I'll be sleeping in the car making $200 a week, eating them square little onion burgers, about to starve to death." And he said, "Here's the problem. Every single night you have given the same speech, the same jokes, word for word. And I've been listening to it, and I got it down, and I can give it better than you can." The professor said, "Boy, do you realize that I have a degree from Harvard?" He said, "I am not interested in degrees. The question is, who can give the speech the best? I can." The professor said, "I'm in the business of education. Pull over at this filling station. We're going to swap places. We're going to a major university. They've never met me, and I'm going to drive the car, give you the briefcase, let you make a fool out of yourself once and for all." Chauffeur said, "That's fine with me. Get the picture." They changed clothes. The real professor has got a little blue hat on, got the car. The chauffeur has got on the custom-made suit, the briefcase reared back in the back. They pull up at the college or the university, thousands of people. The chauffeur, posing as a professor, goes up on the stage with a dignitary, sits down, and the professor with a little blue cap on goes to the very back seat in the rear of the room and sits down with a little hat in his lap. Well, they introduced this old boy, and he got up there, and there's no question about it. He had the speech down word for word. He laid it on them. I mean, he had every joke. He had it. When he got through, they didn't only give him a standing ovation. They jumped up in their chairs, throwed their books in the air, and of course he's up there, he's eating this up, and he's giving this to the professor on the back row, and he's strutting. The moderator comes up. He's got tears in his eyes, and he said, "Folks, wasn't that wonderful?" And they gave him another standing ovation. But then the chauffeur heard something that absolutely froze him to death. The moderator said, "You know, we got through a little bit early. This is the best thing that's happened in a long time. We've got 15 or 20 minutes left. We're going to open the floor for questions." You could have heard a pin drop. He didn't know how he was going to get out of this. And, of course, any time you open the floor for questions, you'll have one in every crowd. You're going to have that guy with books under both arms, been in school 20 years, got glasses so thick, look like he's looking through Coca-Cola bottles. He's going to school because he don't want to have to go get a job. He's been there all his life. This guy jumps up and said, "Mr. Professor, I have a question for you. Let me give you a hypothetical situation here." He said, "You were talking about those dinosaurs that roamed this earth 1,000,000 years ago." He said, "Think about this for a moment. Let's say that 1,000,000 years to the day this oil rig comes in on a wildcat venture and it bores down through that decaying carcass. What will be the pH contained in the soil in the core of the drill bit, and what will be the name of the stratosphere?" He just looked at him for a minute. He said, "Mr. Student, that is undoubtedly the most ignorant question I've ever heard. And to show you how stupid you are, I'll have my chauffeur answer that one for you." It's good to believe in yourself, but get trained totally first. You see what I'm saying? You know, every great accomplishment was always considered impossible. Do you know that? Every great thing. Roger Bannister is from England, and in May the 6th, 1954, he was the first man ever to run a mile in 4 minutes. He probably was the only the first man who ever thought he could do it, because they said it was totally impossible. But he actually trained to run the mile in 4 minutes, and he finally did it. It wasn't but 47 days later that someone ran it a second faster than him, and then all of a sudden they were breaking the 4-minute mile all over the world, because people are funny. They say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. He showed them how to believe. Then there's a great Johnny Weissmuller. He was considered the greatest swimmer of all times in the 1920s. He later became Tarzan in the movies. They said there'd never be another Johnny Weissmuller. No one had ever swum like Johnny Weissmuller. He had the perfect body. He was the first man to win 5 gold medals. He won 51 national titles and broke 67 world records. And for years, 12-year-old girls have been breaking his records. Did you know that? That's the truth. See, believing you can do something will cause you to put forth the effort necessary to succeed. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. What you need to do is visualize your dream. Thomas Edison said he thought in pictures. You need to picture yourself every night before you go to bed accomplishing what you desire. And then when you get up in the morning, the first thing, be able to see it in your mind's eye. We now have a burning desire to reach our goal. We believe we can do it. Now we are ready to set the goal and get started and apply the third key, which is persistence. Thomas Edison, we'll talk about him again. He failed 10,000 times in the development of the incandescent light bulb. And someone asked him about it. They said, how in the world could you fail 10,000 times and keep going? He said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways it wouldn't work. Somebody else asked him, said, you know, you have a handicap. You're deaf. Said, it's marvelous. It's wonderful how much you've been able to accomplish with that handicap. He said, that's not a handicap. That's the best thing I got going for me. By not being able to hear, I don't have to listen to the negative ramblings of fools who tell me I can't do something. See, so he had a great mentality about him. Calvin Coolidge said nothing will take the place of persistence. He said talent won't. Genius won't. Education won't. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. How many people do you know with talent that never make it? And the world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination has solved and will always solve the problems of the human race. Heard about an old lady that wanted to keep on keeping on. She figured she's going to have to marry 4 times if she's going to make it. She ain't going to be able to get through life without it. She's going to marry herself a banker and a movie star and a minister and an undertaker. And she had it all figured out. 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go. Winston Churchill was the epitome of persistence and tenacity. In 1963, John F. Kennedy said that Winston Churchill mobilized the English language and sent it into battle. I bet I know something you don't. Winston Churchill failed the 8th grade 3 times because he couldn't pass English. Isn't it kind of ironic that a few years later that the Oxford University asked Churchill to address their commencement exercises, and he arrives with his usual props, his cane, his cigar, and his top hat. And when he approaches the podium, they give him a standing ovation. He settles the crowd down, takes the hat off, puts it on the podium, takes the cigar out, looks over his admirers, and he shouts, "Never give up!" The words thundered through the hall. He waited a minute, and then he rose up on his toes, and he shouted again, "Never give up!" Words echoed in the ears. Reached for his hat, got his cigar, and left. Probably the shortest and most eloquent commencement address ever given. Anytime we're faced with any problem or any opportunity, those words should echo in our ears. Never give up. How can you develop persistence? Well, we've already talked about a burning desire and believing in yourself. And the next thing you need to do is surround yourself with people who will encourage you. Ladies and gentlemen, you now have the 3 keys necessary to reach your goals in life. To turn your goal keys into gold keys. Intense desire, unshakable faith, and persistence. Go home from this meeting today and get all your old dreams off the shelf and kind of get the dust off them. And then visualize in your mind of yourself succeeding with those goals and those dreams, and then promise yourself to do 2 things. Never give up. Never give up. Thank you so much.